Hello there, and welcome to the 5th day of Squatchmas. Now, we're all ready to get started, so go get your snacks and get up close to the tree there. Tonight's encounter is coming to us from the state of Washington. Are you ready? Me too. Here we go. I have been putting this story off for some time now, but thinking on it, it's a really fun story. I will only be giving generic locations because the area I'm in, I am well known, and I want to keep our big friends safe. I am a truck driver in the state of Washington. I reside about an hour northeast of Seattle as the crow flies. I have lived in Washington state my whole life. I started driving semi-trucks some 15 plus years ago, and I have logged nearly 2 million miles. I've been through almost every state and nearly all types of weather, everything from a beautiful California sunrise to a blizzard whiteout in Wyoming, sandstorms in New Mexico, and tornadoes in Kansas. I've seen animals of all kinds, from an 18-inch tall hairless rat in Kentucky that still gives me the willies, to herds of elk in New Mexico that would make a hunter cry. And yes, I have also seen the legendary black dog. And yes, I still wake up in a cold sweat some nights. Now you might understand some of where I come from. So let me tell you my story. Let's start back in the late 90s. I was around 8 to 10 years old. It was summertime in Washington, about 30 miles from the town of Ellensburg. It was a beautiful day, about 70 to 75 degrees. Blue skies. Just a perfect summer day. For some reason that day, all my pals had other things going on, so that left me on my own, out riding my bike. Now, that was nothing odd back then. It was the type of small town where your mom already knew if you didn't stop at the stop sign long before you got across town back to your house. I was riding up in the old coal mine slag hills, just having a great time being a kid. I stopped to catch my breath at a crossroads. Behind me, up on the corner about 10 to 15 feet away, there was a berry bush. As I looked over my shoulder at it, behind the bush stands up a big black monster animal. This berry bush is a good 6 to 8 feet tall, and I'm 4 to 5 feet below it on the road. But now I'm looking at a black animal that's standing a good 2 feet taller than the bush. I set my little legs to pedaling, and I made the 3 miles home in probably less than 10 minutes. Now, of course, my parents always said that I probably just saw a bear, and until the last year, I had convinced myself of the same thing. But now that I'm grown and a hunter, I know black bear in Washington don't get that big. Now let's come up a whole lot of years to 2018. I decided to get my hunting license, and I was going to get some wild game because, well, like all amateur hunters, I thought there's nothing to it. Just go out, find an animal, bring it home. Well, I'm educated now in the fact that wild game is elusive when you want to find it. This would be in western Washington, 1.5 hours northeast of Seattle. So I'm out chasing after this black bear that's playing with me like a cat with a string. Time and time again, we cross paths just minutes apart. A couple of times, I heard him sniffing at me, but never saw him in the thick underbrush. Finally, I give up and go home, but return 2 days later with a trail camera. I figure if I can't put it in my freezer, I at least want a picture of it. But when I stepped out of my truck, sure enough, there's a black bear track, and what I thought to be a grizzly track right on top of it, though grizzly in this area is rare. But I set the camera up, and I left it for 2 weeks. I returned to find nothing had set it off, not even the grass moving. I know the camera works as I have had a raven play with it before. I got 92 pictures of a raven when looking for a deer. But as I think about the print I saw when I set the camera, this is what I saw. 5 toes and nearly 7 inches across, being perfectly placed as if it was using the bear track to cover its own. Later that season, I try again on the other end of the valley to find a bear. I get set up on an old logging road, tuck into a tree, and start waiting. I didn't have to wait long. About 15 minutes was all, when a scream came from southwest of my location, no more than a quarter mile away. This scream was too loud and too long for a human, but really sounded more like a woman's scream than anything. I stand up, shoulder my 12-gauge pump shotgun loaded with slugs, and I walk backward to my pickup truck a quarter mile back up the road. I throw the old truck in gear, and I went home the long way across and around the far side of the mountain, just so I didn't have to go past where that sound came from. Jump now to 2019, about 5 miles away from my hunting spot where I saw the track in 2018. I'm out cutting firewood by myself that mid-spring day. My saw is running great, and I'm making light work of the job, when I start getting the feeling of being watched. But I brush it off, thinking it's just my nerves because I didn't stop to renew my cutting permit that morning. That's when it hits me. There's a woman calling my name. I stop and whip around, gun drawn, but no one or no thing can be seen. I holster my sidearm and go back to work. Then again louder she calls my name. But this time I realized I was hearing her voice in my head, not in the environment. I ignored it and continued working, and it happened a third time. But this time it seemed almost distant, like she was moving away. I finished loading my truck and drove out of the woods slowly. I never crossed another soul until I hit the main road 16 miles later. Of course, I kept this to myself. I don't want to be labeled as crazy. Now let's jump to the spring of 2024. I'm out cutting firewood again. This spot is 3 miles from where I heard the scream in 2018. I've gotten used to the feeling of being watched, but now I'm just kind of playing it off, as I have a raven that likes to follow me around harassing me. I have a squeaky brake on my truck, and the raven follows me through the woods and squeaks at me. I finish my wood cutting for the day, and I head home. Nearly a week later, I go to unload the wood and find that I had left my favorite saw laying on the ground in the woods. I rush back, but of course, it's long gone. But I noticed on the stump 3 rocks stacked. I go home, but something about the rocks on the stump keeps nagging at me. So I start researching rocks on stumps, and I discover stories of gifts left behind from our big friends. This is where it all clicked, and it came into full view for me, and all my interactions flooded back. I couldn't get enough looking up books and videos and stories. But the one thing I find is no one is having the type of or frequent interactions I have had, or the types of interactions. But I was then armed with new knowledge and a sense of understanding. Maybe false understanding, but hey, it's something. I load up and head back to the woods for another load of wood. I go back down where I lost my saw. The rocks are gone. There are no tracks at all in the soft ground. I call out, telling them I'm here and that I'd like my saw back. And not to worry, my sidearm was not for them. No return reply, but also no feeling of being watched. I climb back in the truck and head 9 miles away by road to my favorite spot for the wood order of the day. No sooner than I get out of the truck, I hear 4 knocks 100 yards off, then 6 knocks 150 yards off. I holler out, "Hey guys, I'm back. Come on out. Let's have a look at ya." I'm answered then by 4 knocks and 6 knocks from the same locations, 100 to 150 yards to the west. I start doing my thing, cutting and splitting, but I stop every so often and whistle, and they return with 4 knocks and 6 knocks. Then during one break, I hear steps 100 to 150 yards to the south. I holler out, "You're not very good at sneaking around, are you?" All sound stops, so I go back to work. But for 4 hours, every time I stop work, I whistle and they knock. At the 4-hour mark, I hear another approach from the northwest, and the 3 to the west of me have a clicking argument that doesn't last long. It sounded like a mother scolding her kids for not being in bed. That was followed by 3 distinct animals walking off further to the west. I was left alone other than the one to the south of me, but I never got any more interactions from it. I finished my load and slowly drove the 15 miles out, looking and listening, but other than my raven, I was alone. I have not seen my friends yet, but I know they are there. I just have to be patient and wait for them to be ready. Signed, A Big Friend's Keeper. Well, thank you so much for sending that in. I found that pretty interesting. Now, if you end up having more interaction with your friends, you know we want to hear about it. Thank you. All right, well, I thought I'd share a quick little comment that was left on the video last night. I got a chuckle out of this one. And Indy says, "Nance, last night I put my earpiece in my ear and went to bed, just as my husband came in. 'Who you listening to?' he asked. 'Nance, you know, the 12 Days of Squatchmas.' Now, I've been listening to that for years, but apparently this was news to my husband, and I can't tell you the belly laughs we had over it. 12 Days of Squatchmas? And we needed it. A jewel to your crown, my friend." Well, thank you so much. I don't even know where the term the 12 Days of Squatchmas came from. I cannot take any credit for it. I'm sure I've seen it somewhere. I really don't know where. And I know traditionally the 12 days of Christmas starts Christmas Day and goes after Christmas into January, I think, to Epiphany. Is that right? Yes. But, I just thought it would be fun for us to do a lead up to Christmas. So I'm glad you and your husband got a good laugh over it, and I hope it's nothing but pure enjoyment for everyone else. All right, everyone. Well, listen, that's going to call it for today, Day 5 of Squatchmas. We'll get together again tomorrow for Day 6. But until then, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.